Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the February 4th meeting of the Glynn County Mainland Planning Commission. Our first order of business will be an invocation and a pledge. Please join us if you will. Commissioner Strickland.
Let us pray. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for this community, for all that live and work here. But ask Thy blessings upon those that protect us, both here and overseas. All of these things we ask in Thy name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, where are we? We have several items tonight on our agenda that are public hearing, so I'm going to go over the meeting procedures for our meeting. The planning staff presents the application request to the Planning Commission during staff reports. This report evaluates how the proposal conforms to the Glynn County zoning ordinance and other applicable regulations and conforms to the comprehensive plan when applied to zoning matters and ordinances. Applicants shall have the opportunity to present their request to the Planning Commission. It is the responsibility of applicants to make presentations on request and to address any conditions or factual findings with which they do not agree. Public comments on public hearing items will be limited to 30 minutes for each opposing side, with a maximum of 5 minutes allocated to each speaker. Public comments on site plans will be limited to 15 minutes for each opposing side, with a maximum of 3 minutes allocated for each speaker. Comments are to be limited to relevant information regarding your position and should avoid being repetitious. If your group has a spokesperson, please allow that individual to present your group's position in the time allotted. The applicant may then provide a rebuttal to any testimony. The chairman may terminate testimony if it becomes repetitive. The chairman will terminate a speaker's time if the speaker begins personal attacks. Your cooperation in this process will be greatly appreciated. Okay, under general business, first item is to approve minutes of the regular meeting held January 7th, 2020.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Well, second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the January 7th meeting. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Shannon, that is unanimous. Item 2 under general business is to approve the revised minutes of the special called Joint Planning Commission work session held on September 24th, 2019, subject to any necessary corrections. The Islands Planning Commission revised the minutes in its January 21st, 2020 meeting, and that change, or that revision, basically read, let me find it here, bear with me. To add the paragraph, additionally, he stated that the planning commissioners are the advisory committee to the Envision Glynn County zoning update process. And what that is referring to is that Mr. Woody Giles, who is a consultant for TSW, mentioned that in his comments, and it was left out of the meetings, or the minutes from our meeting. And the Islands Planning Commission caught that, recognized it, it has now been added, and we need to vote to approve that addition.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the amended minutes. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. That is unanimous, Janet. Thank you. All right, our first item for public hearing is ZM 4177, 521 Harry Driggers Boulevard. Request to amend the Plan Development District for a 3.463 acre parcel, parcel ID 03-17681, located at 521 Harry Driggers Boulevard. The subject property is currently zoned Plan Development District, GC 34-99, and the applicant is requesting an amendment to the Plan Development District to allow commercial uses such as recreational vehicle and boat trailer storage, wash bay, air and vacuum center, ice and water vending, laundromat limited to washers and dryers only, and an outdoor pet park. Walter M. Smith Jr. and Miranda Music Smith, owners and applicant. The applicant, this application was deferred on the January 7th meeting at the request of the applicant, and the applicant has also asked for a deferral on tonight's agenda to an undetermined date.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to defer ZM 4177 until a date uncertain.
A second.
We have a motion and a second to defer ZM 4177 to an undetermined date. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. That is unanimous, Janet. So anyone that is here specifically for that agenda item, you're certainly welcome to leave if you like. And you will be notified if this comes back. So.
I'm apologizing to these people for not allowing them to have a public hearing. An apology, I think, is in order, sir.
Thank you for your input.
So Mr. Smith apologizes to you all.
Yes, sir.
On behalf of the county planning staff.
We do have Sergeant at Arms in the back there.
Do what?
We got our Sergeant at Arms and
I can't hear you, sir.
No, it wasn't part, it wasn't convenience. No, there wasn't. No, sir. No, sir.
Okay, all right.
Anything else?
So moving on, our next item. Okay, our next item is SUP 4216, Pine Ridge Baptist Church Special Use Permit. Request for a special use permit to operate a church in the R9 one-family residential zoning district. The church is existing and is proposing to expand by adding a new social hall. The church is located at 15 Nimitz Drive, parcel ID 03-04833 and zone R9, CSEC Incorporated, agent for Pine Ridge Baptist Church, owner and applicant. Ms. Leaf.
Okay. Good evening, Commissioner. Stephanie Leaf, Planning Manager. This is SUP 4216, Pine Ridge Baptist Church Special Use Permit. So Pine Ridge Baptist Church has been on this location since the 1950s. The church, according to his website, has been incorporated since the 1940s, but it looks like they had started building on the site in the 50s and into the 60s with some different buildings. So the way that we view this now is that the church is an existing non-conforming use because it is zoned, it is the R9 zoning district, and in the R9 zoning district, churches are special uses. So they are not an outright permitted use. They can only be allowed via special use permit. But because the church has been in existence on this property since prior to Glynn County adopting a zoning ordinance, which happened in 1966, we recognize this as a non-conforming use. But they are planning to construct a new 6,000 square foot social hall on the property. So because they are expanding the existing non-conforming use, at that point, that triggers the need to get a special use permit and bring the property into compliance with the zoning code. So that is why this property is, an application is before you today. And following this public hearing, you will also see the site plan for this new social hall. So this is the property right here. This is Old Jessup, and this is Hodges. And the new social hall will be basically where this star is located, but this entire parcel is where this existing church is now. So the comprehensive feature land use map does show this as medium density residential, but the zoning will stay the same as R9. They're just getting a special use permit to allow the church in R9. So this is the site plan that you will also see in the application following this. But this is the existing church in this location here. And this is the new social hall that's at the corner of Hodges and Old Jessup. And so these are your possible actions to recommend approval of the special use, recommend approval with conditions, defer action, or recommend denial. And this is a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. So staff is recommending application SUP 4216 as presented. We did notify adjacent property owners and do public hearing notice and post the site. We did not hear of any concerns from adjacent owners about the church being in this location. As I mentioned, it's been there for a very long time. So there were not any concerns that were given to us, at least prior to this meeting, that we're aware of. So the recommended motion is to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of the application. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Leaf. Commissioners, any questions for staff? Okay. Thank you. Would the applicant please come forward and request action? Please introduce yourself for the record.
So my name's Chris Amos with CSCC Incorporated, and we're here to answer any questions you may have about the project, but I believe that Stephanie has presented all of the information that is relevant to the application.
Commissioners, questions for the applicant?
I think most of my questions are going to be towards the site plan when it comes up, but I don't have any issues with the special use.
Okay. Any other questions? I will entertain a motion.
It's a public hearing.
Oh, I apologize, Mr. Smith. This is a public hearing item. So anyone wishing to speak in favor of this application, please come forward. Please state your name for the record.
I'm Julian Smith. I live on St. Simon's Island. I have no strong feelings about this one way or another, but I do have a question for you having to do with the aerial photo of the tax map of this parcel with the tax map overlaid on it, and it is one of the items in your packet. And if you will look at that, it seems to show that there is parking for this church in the county right-of-way. Can you see the aerial photograph with the tax parcel overlaid? I had trouble reading the site plan, the survey on my screen the other day, even on the big screen at home, and I hope there'll be some clarification. Maybe the surveyor on the board will speak to that. It is disturbing that the packet contains information which seems to indicate that parking for this site is on the county land. So I'm sure that's a mistake, but it's a kind of mistake that this board could ask the county GIS to correct, and I hope you will, if that is simply a mistake. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this conditional use permit? Okay, we'll close the affirmative side. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this request? Seeing none, hearing none, we will close the public comment period. Commissioners. Thank you for the point of order, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the application SP 4196 with the condition that site plan approval is valid. It's a special use permit for the church. Case number SUP 414216 is approved by the Board of Commissioners.
We have a motion and a second to approve SUP 4216. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. That is unanimous, Janet. Thank you. Our next item, site plan approval, SP 4196, Pine Ridge Baptist Church Social Hall. Consider site plan approval for a new 6,000 square feet social hall for Pine Ridge Baptist Church located at 15 Nimitz Drive, parcel ID 03-04833. Property is zoned R9, one family residential. CSEC Incorporated, agent for Pine Ridge Baptist Church, owner and applicant. Ms. Leaf.
Thank you. This is SP 4196, Pine Ridge Baptist Church Social Hall. So this is the site plan approval application for the 6,000 square foot new social hall. And as I mentioned in the last application as well, right where the star is located is where the new social hall is being proposed. And this is the site plan. And I know in one of the comments that you just had with the other application, it does look like there is a good amount of parking that may be in the right-of-way that would be existing. I'm not exactly sure how long that's been in existence, but since the church has been there since the 50s, it very well could have been existing to some extent since then. Where they're proposing is right in this location, and they are showing new parking spaces for the social hall. They do have stormwater detention that they're showing in this location back here. And they do have a new, this is a zoomed in version, they are showing a new access that comes off of Hodges. These are the elevations. I did email these to you the other day, so these were not in your packet, but these are the proposed elevations for the social hall. And these are your possible actions. Staff recommends approval of the site plan, but with the condition that's only valid if the special use permit for the church is approved by the Board of Commissioners. And these are your proposed motions.
Any questions for staff?
I have a question. They mentioned that on item 6, buffers were provided along all public roads, and on the site plan, he only shows 3 short segments of buffers on there.
These hatched areas?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll ask the applicant's representative to talk a little bit more about that, because if it is truly just that segment and not the entirety, then that would need to be a modification to your buffer. It was indicated that they would be the entirety of the right-of-way, but I'll ask him to clarify that.
Okay, and I mean, they maintain this very nice. It looks great just the way it is, and
Yeah.
buffer variance, whatever, if they want to do that. But I thought there was one residential lot in the back, and would a buffer be required against residential in this particular case? On the back right of the property, this church being, I mean, they're both R9,
Yeah.
but it is more of a commercial, I guess, use.
Right.
And that's where I struggle with the church being a commercial use.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I'll double check the code and just check on that to see if it needs to be required. And my understanding is, and he can clarify if I'm wrong, but I believe this structure back there is not staying on the property. I think it may actually be removed from the site.
No, I mean,
You mean back here?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, further
on
back?
the other
Okay.
side, off Nimitz.
Oh, off Nimitz. Okay.
Somebody
Right back
else's
there,
house.
Right there.
Oh, okay, back here. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're thinking
No, the other line to the right there, yeah,
right here? Okay.
from Nimitz,
Okay. So you're thinking a
back to-
buffer right here?
right. That's
Okay.
Being a residential.
Okay, and that I think is really up to your purview because this is existing. I mean, the only portion, really the development area of the proposed addition is on this side. So in some cases, when there's been existing development on one part of the property, we haven't, and if they don't have a buffer, we haven't always had them add the buffer. So I think that is within your purview of whether you want to require that in that location, if you feel that
Okay.
that area should have it.
That's all I have.
Any further questions for staff?
Steffi, would you look into what Mr. Smith was talking about, just to see how much the encroachment is onto the county right-of-way there along Old Jessup, just
Yeah.
out of curiosity?
Yeah, I mean, if this is as accurate
I've never thought
as-
about it. I
yeah,
drive by it all the time, and I've never thought about it, but I see what he's talking about now.
Right.
It may be out there quite a bit.
Yeah, I can definitely check in and see if there's ever been a right-of-way encroachment agreement with the county for any of that. That's something I can definitely look into and find out.
And then if you'll let us know,
Yes,
thank you.
definitely.
Paved.
It's paved through
It's
there.
paved. It's sidewalk and paved, yeah.
Yeah, it's basically, I mean, the curb cut is the extent of that lot. I mean, it's really just a total curb cut there.
Any additional questions or comments for staff? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion.
This is
Oh,
a site plan, yeah.
approval, I'm
I did it earlier.
Okay, my turn.
So site plans are, we do take public comments for site plans. So anyone wishing to speak regarding this site plan, please come forward and state your name.
Did we ask the applicant?
Sorry?
Did we ask the applicant to come up?
Oh, he didn't.
We did for the other part.
I need to further my agenda, I think. So spell it out so I can follow it in a little more detail. So would the applicant please come forward and request action? Please state your name again for the record.
So once again, Chris Amos with CSCC Incorporated. I'd like to address a couple of things that came up in your discussion with Stephanie. We didn't look at the buffer behind the existing church parcel. That's been there for a long time and was not really involved in this new project. So we didn't have any conversation with staff about buffers between the two uses. My understanding is it's a zoning issue, not a use issue, though, is it not? And since it was zoned R9, even though it's a different use abutting the residential, it wouldn't have occurred to me that we might need a buffer on that existing property line. The parking buffers were put in to buffer the new parking lot from the street, not anything else. And additional buffers really don't work all that well, except adjacent to the parking, because we've got existing facilities, including the parking lot that's in between the church and the main road. The parking encroachments into the right-of-way that may be there, that are there, have been there for a very long time. And I don't know whether that occurred as a result of parking that 40 years ago was paved in the right-of-way, or if we had right-of-way acquisition that occurred and the parking was already there. I'm not sure. Clearly, they've been using this parking for a very long time and need to be able to continue to use the parking for the church to function properly. So we would ask that you approve the site plan as submitted, and if you got any other questions, I hopefully can answer them.
Back to the buffer issue on that. So are you planning only then on buffers in those 3 small areas they were showing?
That is correct.
Oh,
The only
okay.
buffers that we were proposing on the site plan are the ones that are shown on the site plan. We weren't proposing to buffer anywhere else.
Okay. And why not the length of Hodges Drive where it's not, where there aren't drives or things like that? Because I know there is a residential structure across from the new building.
I think we could
also.
probably buffer most of the length of Hodges Drive. I was trying to buffer the parking area, and so I didn't
Okay.
really give consideration to that. We can certainly go back and look at that, though.
I mean, I don't have a problem with just buffering the parking area. It's very well maintained. It's not a eyesore by any means, the way it is right now. Sometimes our buffers, one size don't fit all.
Yes, I agree with that.
Mr. Amos?
Yes.
I just have one question, and I probably already know the answer to it, but I noticed that there's a grease trap on here that for the new building.
Yes.
Are they going to be cooking there?
Yes. There will be a kitchen in the building. That is correct.
Okay.
That's going to be a gravity flow then to the sewer out front?
Yeah, there's an existing collection tank that is just south of the church. I think it's shown on there, but honestly, I can't see that far away, so I don't know. I believe it's shown on the site plan. And it's being pumped from there into the Glynn County sewer system. The church is on a private water system.
Yeah.
And that private water system will be extended to the new social hall, but we're on public sewer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any further questions for the applicant?
Chairman, make a motion to approve SP 4196, Pine Ridge Baptist Church Social Hall.
Let's ask for public hearing. Is there anyone that wishes to speak on this matter? If so, please come forward and state your name.
Quick.
Julian Smith again. I'll do this as quickly as possible. The potential conflict having to do with encroachments into the public right-of-way, into public property, is a long existing problem in Glynn County. I own property in another area in Glynn County near Brunswick, where the property owners have encroached 50 feet in some places onto county right-of-way, county property rather, and have built have built garages and so on right up to the property line because the county was simply not paying attention, didn't want to pay attention. And this is very typical of some of the lower income areas in Glynn County. And there can be multiple fusses in the future. So I think it would be useful for you all to start preparing yourself for that, particularly as some older properties are rehabbed. So thank you, and I hope this will get straightened out. Bye.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on this site plan? Okay, we will close the public comment period. Now,
You want me to try again?
please.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve SP 4196, Pine Ridge Baptist Church Social Hall.
I second.
Just to clarify before I ask the question, does that motion as presented with the buffers the way that they are? Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve SP 4196 as presented. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. That is unanimous, Janet. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Next item is a special use permit, SUP 4223, Salt Shaker Entertainment Special Use Permit. Request for a special use permit to operate an amusement center in the general commercial zoning district. The applicant is proposing to operate a family entertainment center. The property is located at 5581 Habersham Street. Parcel ID is 03-04953, and it is zone general commercial. Atlantic Southeast Enterprises LLC owner and Salt Shaker Entertainment Incorporated applicant. Ms. Leaf.
Thank you. This is SUP 4223, and this property, Salt Shaker Entertainment, is interested in doing a new amusement center. So the property is zoned general commercial, and amusement centers are a special use in the zoning district. So primarily they are looking to do a family entertainment center. They plan to have bounce houses, different activities for children and families. So that is the primary orientation of the amusement center. So it'd be family entertainment. The 25,000 square foot building is currently vacant. It's been vacant for a couple years now. And the entertainment center will operate within the confines of that existing building. So here's the property. This is Community Road. This is Habersham. And so the existing building is here where the star is located. There is another adjacent property over here. And all the parking that's existing is in this front area. The comprehensive plan future land use map actually does show this area as industrial. There is a lot of industrial that surrounds the area, but they are not looking to rezone. The zoning will stay general commercial as it is. And this is their survey of the property showing the existing building. And these are some of the floor plans. These aren't real visible on the screen. Hopefully they were a little better in your packet, or if you're able to zoom in on your home computer. But this is a layout of what they're proposing to do within the building with the bounce houses and where the different use areas are. So these are your possible actions. Staff recommendation is for approval of the application as presented. And these are your possible motions, and the recommended motion is to move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of this application as presented. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I know the
Thank you, Ms.
applicant's here
Lee.
as well.
Any questions for staff? Okay. This is a public hearing item. Again, yes. Would the applicant please come forward and request action? Thanks for keeping me straight. Hello, sir. Please state your name for the record.
Hello, my name is Michael Johnson. I represent Atlantic Southeast Enterprises LLC and Salt Shaker Entertainment. What we're proposing is a family entertainment center in the old Bergeron building. Most people know it by that. 10,000 square feet, pretty much with just exactly what was represented, with the bouncy houses and party rooms for birthday parties.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Johnson, I have a question. I can see this as an extremely popular venue. How many people will be, or how many people do you predict would be inside that building at any one time?
Well, the general design is for 10,000 square feet, with about 70% of that space being taken up by inflatables. So it's very limited. So that'll be something as the owner coming into it and would have to judge as he's going through. So you saw the picture, we're enhancing the bathrooms to cover for the whole 10,000 square feet, but much of the space will be taken by the inflatables. So as much as he would want to put in there to get the revenue, but the building will only be able to handle so much. I don't know what that exact, excuse me, that exact
Well, I
number
guess
is.
I'm curious about what the fire code would allow in that, and from that standpoint, numbers of people, but then, you know, parking spaces. I know 44 parking spaces sounds like a lot, but if it's going to be an extremely popular venue, would you have enough parking?
We do. We have an additional 2 acres. You saw the 2 sides. The other side is for overflow parking. And we're right now, probably this week, doing the fire inspection, and they're going through all that with us. So they're taking the site, they're taking the plan. We do have it fully sprinkled, and we're a full alarm and fire system in place. So they would be able to tell us the occupancy of what can and can't be done on that. So I can't answer that question at this point,
Okay.
but I will be in the very near future.
Thank you.
Any further questions for staff or the applicant? Thank you, sir. This is a public hearing item. I'll open the floor to all those that would wish to speak in favor of this application.
Julian Smith again. I still live on St. Simon's. I drive past this building several times a week because I own property out at the end of Canal Road. And I'm glad to see that it's going to be put to use again. I wish the applicant had included the other parcel, the vacant parcel next door, in the overall plans for that overflow parking. I would hope that this is the kind of venue that could be used for various kinds of family celebrations that would distract some of the tendency to use St. Simon's Island as a place to party. Yes, I'm being selfish, Mr. Strickland, very selfish. I could see this as a venue that could be used for weddings, where there are several young families and they have kids. So let the kids come and make a lot of noise and jump around, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm very upbeat about this. I hope you will be too. Last month, somebody came in with a terrible application and said it was a no-brainer. Well, this one is a no-brainer, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? We will close that portion of the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this application? Hearing none, seeing none, we will close the public hearing portion. Now, commissioners.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend to the Board of Commissioners approval of application SUP 4223 as presented.
We have a motion and a second to approve SUP 4223 as presented. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. That is unanimous, Janet. Thank you. Okay. Our last public hearing item is ZM 4224, Pot Liquor Farms rezone. Request to change the zoning for a 7.42 acre property at 136 Pot Liquor Place on Blythe Island from R20 one-family residential to Conservation Preservation CP, and Conservation Preservation CP to Forest Agricultural, with conditions limiting uses and conservation preservation. The applicant is proposing to operate a commercial farm to include, but not be limited to, field crops, truck gardening products, fruit and nut trees, poultry for egg production, bees for honey production, farm stand, and limited agritourism tours and private dining events. Parcel ID 03-06708, Pot Liquor Farms LLC, owner and applicant. Ms. Lee.
Thank you. This is ZM 4224, Pot Liquor Farm rezone. So this application, the property is currently zoned R20 and Conservation Preservation, because about almost half the property is located in the marsh area. And they are looking to rezone to Forest Agricultural and Conservation Preservation, and the Forest Agricultural piece would have limited uses on that. So this is the property here. This is Blythe Island Highway, heading north. This property currently, as you see, it does extend out to the marsh. This is the R20 property. It's kind of in the yellow. There is a parcel here that is not part of this application. So the applicant's property does kind of go around this property. There is an existing single-family house that's on the property, and they are currently growing crops and have a farm on the property now. Horticulture is an allowed use under R20, but it is for non-commercial use. So they've been growing the crops for use in the owner's own restaurant, but they are looking to expand that operation and be able to sell the crops to other restaurants, as well as have a farm stand potentially, and sell to other markets is their goal. And just a couple things, since the application was noticed, they, eventually the applicants would like to have agritourism and do some farm tours and some, farm-to-table dining events. But what I did talk about with the applicant is really those are special events that really would need a special use permit under forest agriculture. The way it works to rezone to a conventional zoning district is you can allow all the uses allowed in that zoning district, and you can take away uses, you just can't add any uses. So if you're going to be adding uses, at that point, you either need to look at another zoning district that would accommodate those uses, or look to do a plan development and do a PD text that would really specify what you want to do on the property. So with that, we did talk about it, and anything that would qualify as a special event, they will come back to the county and at that point seek a special use permit in order to have different events on the property. So really the primary goal now is to have the uses allowed in FA that would support what they want to do, growing the crops and having bees for honey and having chickens for eggs. So this is the comprehensive plan land use map that does show this property as low-density residential. So rezoned to forest agricultural is still considered low density according to the comp plan. So that is why you do not see a future land use map amendment request accompanying this. So this is just a rezone because the use is in compliance with the future land use map. This is just an aerial view just to give you a little better view of what's in the area. And so most of the activity that will be on the property is really kind of where the star is located. There'll be, and this shows their sketch plan that they submitted, showing a little bit more about where everything will be. Potlicker Place is a private access easement, so that comes off of Blythe Island Road. So they do have access along that private access easement to the property. A corner of the property does also front on Blythe Island Road here, so they could have access here, but they are not proposing that at this time. They would come off of Potlicker Place, which is the current access. Back here, closer to the marsh, is a single-family home. And they are showing where future parking for events or dinners will be, but as I mentioned, that would come back before you all for a special use permit if that did occur in the future. So these are their proposed restrictions on uses. So they are, so under the FA, what this basically lists is anything that's allowed in FA would be allowed with the exception of these particular uses. And there's quite a few. As you may note, a lot of, I guess, the uses that can tend to be a little more controversial or potentially impact neighbors, are prohibited on this property. So they are not going to allow any kind of livestock, pigs, cows, horses, or goats. They will not have a tree farm or forest management. They do plan to have, fruit and nut trees, more of an orchard, but they wouldn't be doing timbering per se on the property. Dredging, landfill, or excavation of natural materials, that would be prohibited. Child care center, and then these are the conditional and special uses that are currently allowed under FA zoning, and these would also be prohibited on this property. So no public utility installations, no commercial riding stables, no two-family dwelling or industrialized dwelling. So these are your possible actions. Staff recommendation is to approve this project to rezone from R20 to R20 and CP to FA and CP with the condition that the uses listed on the recommended motion in the staff report are prohibited. And these are your possible motions. And then under your recommended motion from staff, this is just including the uses that I discussed in the previous slide. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. I know the applicants are here as well.
This may be a question for the applicant. One of the things you didn't mention was roosters. Roosters are very controversial in this county for some reason. So what about roosters?
Yeah, I'll let the applicants address that. We did not specifically discuss that, and they did not specifically include that as something they would prohibit that I recall, but I'll let them address that. That might be something they would be willing to limit or prohibit.
I've got a question. So I want to make one clarity. You said they're allowed to grow crops.
Correct.
Personal use, but they are using it in a restaurant now?
They are now because it's the owner's own restaurant, and so they did talk with us about that, and what our interpretation was that he's growing them for his restaurant, but he would not be allowed, or they would not be allowed to sell them to other restaurants who use them and sell them in another market. So it's really just providing for the owner's personal business, and so that is what they've been doing, but now that they do want to expand it and have what we would consider more of that commercial use, then that is what triggered them to come do this.
So
for
them
you.
actually providing the props in their own restaurant is not commercial use?
That was our interpretation. Yeah, they did discuss it with us when they first wanted to do that on the property, and so that was our interpretation that we would allow that, for their business, because it was just providing for their business, not for other businesses. So.
Well, in follow-up to John's question, the restaurant is a commercial venue. And they take the food that they grow at this farm and they take it over there to sell it. I mean, I always lean to the staff because you're the folks that know, but to me, that's a very fine line as far as, where the dividing line is there.
Right, yeah, I agree that, I mean, that is an area that, could be gray, that could have different interpretations. In our interpretation, we considered it really in ingredients for their restaurant. It might be different if they, if they had a farmer's market stand and they were growing everything on their property, taking it to a farmer's market. When they grow a tomato, they're selling the tomato whole. But I agree, it's a gray area that could definitely have different interpretations.
What's the difference whether they sell it at a farmer's market or selling in their restaurant?
Yeah. They're ingredients for a dish that they're selling, so maybe it's just a matter of where along that supply chain it falls. But
I have two questions,
Yeah.
Stephanie. One, who owns Pot Liquor Lane, Pot Liquor Access Road?
right.
Who owns that?
They show it as that it's part of their ownership, that there is a private access easement across it. It was not clear from, and I'm sure they can respond more on this, but it wasn't clear from what I looked at, whether, who exactly could access off of Pot Liquors. So it said it was an easement for ingress and egress, but I wasn't sure exactly who that easement benefited, but they can probably address that a little more. But they do show it as their
So part
property.
two, the only reason they're asking for rezoning is so that they can sell their goods to other than their own restaurant. Is that in a nutshell?
So that they could market it to other restaurants, sell it. So they could, if they wanted to sell it at a farmer's market, if they wanted to have a farm stand on their property, if they wanted to sell it, basically directly to a consumer, maybe is the best way to describe that. Then
No planned events, no party events, no social gatherings that are for paid, those kinds of things?
Yeah, basically the way that we would look at it is if it is considered a place of public assembly. So if they are inviting the public to come to their property for any kind of event, the way that we've handled it for other similar situations is that that is a special use under FA, is a place of public assembly. So, if it's a private party for their family or for their personal friends, that would not be the same as a public assembly where they would be, inviting members of the public to come to the property for an event.
I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I just want to be clear.
Yeah.
I agree, John.
Yes.
So how will we know if they're not selling it to other restaurants versus just selling in their own restaurant? I mean, is it like a county person in the restaurant monitoring, or how does this work?
Right. We,
Grocery police.
I don't think, except for, through the business licensing process, maybe with environmental health permitting, I'm not sure if there might be something there that would, that they might need to get because of the different venues that they're selling it. But that's a very good point. The same for, I'm sure there's people all over in the FA that might grow crops and sell it at a farmer's market that have never come before this board to, get a permit to do something. So it's, and that probably wasn't the best example because in FA you can't do that, but say you're in R20 and you have a garden and you're growing tomatoes and sell them at the farmer's market. That would be an example of, that is commercial, but, we don't know that's happening, and we don't go to the farmer's market and ask what your zoning district is at your farm stand, so.
Okay, thank you.
Steffi, just for clarification, they cannot have any kind of parties or social events or anything like that unless they come back before this board. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was my discussion with them, was that like I mentioned, it can be a private event for your family and friends, but it's not something, so if they were to advertise, for $50 a person, come and have a farm-to-table experience at the farm, and anyone in the public can sign up and buy tickets to come to that event, that would not be allowed here. They would need to have a special use permit in order to do something along those lines.
I know one of the objections to this has also been, and maybe this is, once again, is a question for the applicant, if they're going to raise bees there, how does the county spray for mosquitoes?
Yeah, we did have a comment from a neighbor asking about that if they're raising bees, would that prohibit spraying in the surrounding area for mosquitoes? That's something I would need to check on to see how that is handled. I do not know.
Because I don't think bees and mosquito controlled substances get along that well together. And so, most places you can't do it. And of course, everybody knows Blythe Island doesn't have any mosquitoes, so, it might become a moot point, but
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, I would need to check on that. I do not know exactly how
That's going to have to be something that's resolved, quickly.
Right. And the applicants may know, from like I said, they've already been growing, crops in the area. So they might just know just from their research or maybe talking to officials of the county about that.
Stephanie, is there not other growing operations on Blythe Island already?
Growing
there not?
operations. I cannot think of any that I know of, but I think, to Commissioner Williams' question, they may be happening, on R20, other zoning districts on Blythe Island that we just don't know are commercial operations. They're just not ones that we're aware of.
Well, I'm not saying that
Yeah.
they're necessarily commercial, but I think, and maybe the applicant can speak to that, but I think there probably are some other growing operations there.
There's definitely, a number of different agricultural-oriented, operations out there. This property, before the owners bought it, they had goats for many years on the property. I think a lot of people know this area is, they had goats, and that's, that was not allowed under the R20 zoning. And so I know, there's a little bit more of a rural feel on Blythe Island, so I'm sure there's a variety of different things going on that's a little bit more rural, but although the zoning predominantly, is R20 for most. There's a few FA parcels on Blythe Island, but majority is R20.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for staff? Okay, thank you. Would the applicant please come forward and request action? Good evening, sir. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Chairman, I'm John McQuigg. I'm the attorney representing the applicant in this matter. I've heard your questions, and probably that's the best way to start, but one of the biggest issues that I think that we've seen is, this has been listed as a commercial operation. Whenever you hear that word, that phrase, commercial operation, you're thinking, oh my goodness, we got combines coming, we got huge tractors coming, we got folks tilling the soil, spraying chemicals, doing all kind of crazy stuff. Not happening. You saw on the site plan out there, these things have already been in place for the past year. Ms. Leaf didn't say that, but they've been there for a year already. I don't know how many complaints you've received or the county's received. I would anticipate the answer is 0, all right? I don't think that this is going to bring up any kind of bad blood, have any bad consequence to the area, to Blythe Island in general, to any neighbors. When we started the process, the idea was, well, do we need to go for a planned development, which we didn't think we wanted to go that route, or can we do something else? And the idea was, let's make this FA with an abundance of restrictions. And if you looked up there were an abundance of restrictions. We don't want a traditional FA. We don't want horses and cows and pigs and all the rest that might go with it. We don't want a big operation. We want it to be small. It's been small. It'll continue to be small. but it's been wonderful. The amount of produce that's been produced is too much for one place. And the folks that own this want to share. They can't. I mean, they could, Mr. Williams. They could give it or sell it to anybody. Nobody'd know the difference.
I know I wouldn't.
And you know what? I'm sure other folks have been doing that. They've probably been selling things out of their garden to folks, or they're not supposed to. We're asking you for permission because that's what we're supposed to do. So this application is simply asking you to do the right thing. We're asking to do the right thing. Let us continue to grow the vegetables. Let us have the bees that have been out there. We don't know that there's any real issue with mosquitoes. I don't know how many folks have complained to the county, but we've called the county about it. We don't know that the neighbors have had problems. Love to hear about it. I'd love for the county to figure out how they can resolve that issue. Because if they're killing all the bees around here, that's a big problem for everybody anyway. I know there's mosquitoes in Glynn County. I live here too. Roosters. They don't lay eggs. We don't want them. You know, we're going to have a small group of chickens out there to grow eggs, keep it all organic, keep it all certified, and keep it small like it's been small. We don't want goats like it's been there for the past 20 years. We don't want it looking as bad as it did for a long time. It's been cleaned up substantially. 4 dumpsters full of stuff has been hauled off that property, and now it's nice. And I would encourage anybody who has questions to come up to the farm and check it out.
So Mr. McQuigg, you're saying that the size of the operation is not going to change?
That's right.
Okay.
You said the chickens, a small number, or you said group, or what is that? Is that 5 or 500 or?
You know, Mr. Sam McPherson is, he and his wife and daughter live on that property, and he can speak to those questions. If you'll allow him to come up after me, he can answer those specific questions for you.
I think that was one of the issues, that they didn't want it to smell like a chicken ranch out there.
Yeah, no, and that's not the intention. Is we're not butchering chickens for the restaurant. We're producing the produce, not the animals for it.
Right. And well, personally, as you know, raising crops or small endeavor like this, I don't know, seems maybe less evasive than having 4 or 5 large homes in there, possibly. But seems more green anyway. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I may not have answered all your questions, and I apologize. Were there other questions that you needed to ask me?
Can we invite the gentleman up that you
Yes, sir.
asked about, or that you mentioned?
Man, I am freezing.
Hello, sir. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Sam McPherson, and I'm the grower on Blythe Island. I had just a little prepared thing,
Please.
just so I wouldn't ramble on. I'm the grower at Potlicker Farm. This is a 2 to 3 acre market garden. We're providing produce and honey to the Georgia Sea Grill on St. Simon's Island. We're a certified naturally grown market garden, which means that we have the same standards as organic certification, but it's peer-to-peer and farmer-to-farmer. I actually just went to Nashville, Georgia and certified another farm in this. I've been growing organically for around 5 years now, and for a little over a year on Blythe Island. I'm a Navy veteran. I was honorably discharged. I'm a trained chef. My wife and I both graduated from Camden County. She grew up out in Woodbine, and I grew up out in Waverly. We know there is a need for more local and naturally grown clean produce since my wife and I operated an organic co-op in Camden County for a number of years. This experience told us that there was an overwhelming need for more local, cleaner, and sustainable items on menus and at the local farmers market. This led us to Potlicker Place on Blythe Island. The now owner, Mr. Gowan, approached me about starting a farm after he found the old goat farm, as everybody knew it. I worked for Zach at Georgia Sea Grill while completing my culinary apprenticeship through the College of Coastal Georgia here locally in Brunswick. I used my GI Bill to do it. I found out through working with Zach that he has a dedication to finding smaller and local organic producers that are sustainable to work with and procure items from for the Georgia Sea Grill. And us getting together was really, the farm was born out of his want for the cleaner produce and my dedication to it, as well as his dedication to it. And I've heard a lot of concerns from people, and face-to-face, and people have called me and, you know, sent me messages on Facebook, and I've tried to respond to everybody and call people if I can, or talk to them face-to-face. I really prefer that. So just a few bullet points, and then I'll get away from y'all, except for the questions you probably already have. We do not want to be a large agricultural producer. We're a market garden. Farm is kind of a misnomer for us. Simply an intensely planted seasonal producer. The only livestock we intend to have is the chickens that we already do. The number's around 10 to 15, and we'll never go over 30. As in, like, if I need to replace my 15 chickens, I'll get 15 little chicks, and then the other hens will go to pasture, as they say. We have a movable coop and a movable fence. We don't have a permanent chicken house, and we don't have any plans for a commercial chicken house whatsoever. Literally, I'm not into chickens. I like their eggs, but I really use them to amend the soil. That's good. That's why I move them around the whole property. And if anybody had a problem with them, I would immediately probably just get rid of them because I don't want to shake the boat too much. We don't have a rooster. We did, but I took him out. He was an accidental rooster. He was a volunteer rooster, as they say. The equipment we have is purposely smaller, and most of our tools are hand tools. The cultivation uses less fossil fuels and is much quieter. We don't have a big tractor. I have like a BCS, like a walk-behind tractor tiller. We bought all of these purposely so that we wouldn't be too loud, we wouldn't be too big, they wouldn't see giant tractors. Although my back sometimes tells me that I need a big tractor. I'm not going to get one, I'm not saying that. But in the future, we would like to have small farm dinners of intimate groups. We also plan to have education tours for groups, and a couple elementary schools have already contacted us. These do not mean any permanence or restaurant structure. There's no plan or intent to have a large-scale tourism or event venue on the property. And finally, just a couple positive things, because I think, you know, we dwell on only the negative things a lot of times. We will provide to the local community, not just to restaurants, but at the downtown farmers market. I think we need more local farms doing just this. We have already removed, as Mr. McQuick said, many tons and dump truck loads of metal, plastic, and trash. It really was just refrigerators and metal and plastic out there, and we're still cleaning it up. And finally, we want a beautiful, large garden, not an agricultural eyesore. You got to think like field of sunflowers, not large tractors spraying chemicals. And finally, my wife and I do live at the residence. We have a daughter. We love that she's getting to grow up on that island and in the area that we're from, and we don't want to change it at all. So.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Commissioners, are there any questions for either of these gentlemen?
Any complaints about your chickens at all from the neighbors?
I've had no complaints about the chickens to me directly. I've in fact tried to give out eggs to kind of bribe people, you know, to like chickens. Like I said, we did have a volunteer rooster, and I twisted his neck about a couple weeks ago because I didn't want there to be any problem with it.
Okay, don't say that. Peter will be here before long.
Yeah, it's what we eat, you know.
To back up, you understand right now, if this was to be approved, that you can't hold any kind of social events there?
Yes, sir.
Under this rezoning. There can't be any private parties, there can't be anything like that. If you want to do that, you have to come back before this commission for permission.
Absolutely. Yes, sir, we do. And that's one of the things we talked to Ms. Leaf about.
Come back.
We talked to Ms. Leaf about because that would be something in the future. What we don't want to do is take that off the board and have to do this all over again with a plan development. So we'd like to go ahead and put it in the text now and say, okay, this is going to be a special use. We'll come back in front of you and say, okay, everything is wonderful. We'd love to do a special use. Give us permission. We know we have to come back to you to do that.
Right, because when you put dining and things like that, first thing people think of is venues and weddings and different things like that, and drinking and traffic and noise and
But that is not what you would be approving today.
Right, exactly. And I just want to make sure that there's no misunderstanding on that.
That would be an allowed future use with special permission,
Right.
which is the special use permit. Yes, sir.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Williams asked a
Yeah,
question earlier.
any issues in terms of just the bees or just any disturbances from the neighbors, concerns about what's been going on? And you said that you were contacted on Facebook. I mean, what are some of the concerns? I'm sure we'll hear from, but I want
Oh,
to
I'm
hear.
sure, yes. The chicken houses, sorry to interrupt, but the chicken house and the noise as well, in the future, not that they're saying that we're already doing it, they're saying in the future they don't want us to have a large chicken house. I don't have any experience in that. They're disgusting. I've been in them. They smell. I agree. I don't want, if our neighbors were trying to put up one, I would be here on that side saying, no, I don't want it to happen. So I totally understand their concerns about it. As far as the bees go, we contacted, how it works is you contact the county office that sprays the mosquito control, and you have to give a really good detailed explanation and reason why you don't want them coming down, really are all the way down our private entrance. They were coming down right by my, like right into my yard in my house. It wasn't even, it was past my driveway. So we put up a gate and they actually come down right down to the gate still and then spray all around us too. But you're right, if they did spray near the bees, they would die. And then half of my crops would not get pollinated, as well as my neighbor's lemon tree or the blueberry bushes down the road.
And Mr. Williams, you asked earlier about Potlicker Place.
Yes.
It's a private easement. We own it. We own that land.
Okay.
And the only other people that can use it besides us are standing over here or sitting over here with us. That's Mr. and Mrs. Page, who are also benefited by that easement. So they are benefited, we're benefited, but we're the owners of that property. And the issue that Sam spoke of just a minute ago is the county was driving down Potlicker Place to spray, and we just stopped them. We said, don't do that. They're on Blythe Drive, but they stay on the public road. They don't come down the private easement.
Gotcha.
Mr. Sam, could I ask you a question about the bees?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I know there are many people in the county that have bees. Could you tell us what concerns people had about the bees? Are they afraid that they're going to get loose?
Oh, swarm or something?
Right. I mean,
Bees
I'm curious
are
about it
funny.
because I know there are so many people that are creating local honey
Yes,
in our
there
whole
are.
county now.
That probably don't come to get zoned for that.
Right.
Yes, ma'am. How it works is really when bees, if they're worried about swarms, bees, when they swarm, they fill themselves full of honey and they gather around the queen and then they go hang in a tree somewhere. So you could literally go up and like pat them and they wouldn't do anything. As far as just the general activity of bees, they don't want to be around us at all. They are very solitary creatures. I think that they're kind of irritated that we're even around them most of the time.
So when people were contacting you on Facebook,
Not about the
it was
bees,
not
it was
about,
the
just
mosquito
about the
control.
mosquitoes.
And I understand half of Potlicker's a swamp, you know. I mean, I'm out there every day and I'm getting eaten up. But I still would rather have bees.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
John, I have a question. Mr. Quick, fast forward 2, 3, 4 years, business models change, business plans change, the property changes hands. With the revised zoning, what would the neighbors' protection be for future use that may be different than what your plans are?
The only thing that's going to be permitted is what you approve, any special use, those parties that we were talking about, agritourism. You know, anybody pay to get on that property for any kind of party, and I think there was a report somebody made of, hey, we don't want anything going on over there. We don't want people drinking and driving down the road, et cetera. They've got to come to you first, or whoever's in your place at that point, 2 or 3 years down the road, and ask you for permission to allow that special use. So once you approve, and I'm hoping you do, this request today, whoever wants to change that use comes back in front of you and requests, again, another public hearing for that special use.
Commissioners, any further questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing item. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of this application, please come forward. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Please state your name for the record.
Joan Scarborough. I live 2 doors down from Pot Liquor Farm. I've been out there 27 years. I used to go feed the goats that belong to Ernie. I enjoy the neighborhood. These folks have cleaned it up. It's a pleasant place to look at. I envy the master gardener and all the things that he's able to grow because I cannot. And I have never heard from any of the neighbors any complaints. It's a beautiful place, with the exception of the house that seems to sit in the middle of his farm that didn't need to be there. But that's a whole nother story. There's a rooster that lives across the road. I hear him every morning. He doesn't belong to them, but I enjoy hearing the rooster. So we need to just enjoy the fact that it's a nice rural setting and be appreciative of what he has done with his property. And Zach Gowan's not going to do anything that is out of the ordinary, that is not tasteful. He has a wonderful restaurant on the island, and that's primarily what the food was going to in the first place. That was the whole plan. So I am very much in favor. My daughter lives 2 doors down. I used to go feed the goats over there. It's just a very pleasant place to be, and now I have been down Pot Liquor Road and looked at what he's done with the property, and it's beautiful. And I certainly am in favor of you approving this. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the application? Good evening, sir. Please state your name for the record.
Yes, my name is Milton Hall, and I, too, am a resident on Blythe Island. And they don't know that we were here tonight, but my wife and family and I, we're very excited about watching what's taking place over there. We don't have a relationship with them, but we're residents. And the fact that there are chickens all over Blythe Island, their few chickens really don't create a concern for us either. But I've heard many positives from a lot of neighbors. I've heard some people that have been concerned about it as well via our Facebook neighborhood page there on Blythe Island. But my concern, the only reason why I wanted to speak was to make sure that there was more than just one voice speaking in support. It seems like when people support an idea, they don't come out in droves. When people oppose an idea, you tend to hear a little more from them. So there's lots of people on Blythe Island that are very excited to see this take place. We're excited about the one of the people that live right across the street from him. He's not here tonight, but on Saturday, my wife and I were walking, and he commented about he now has marshfront property. He can see the marsh now, whereas used to it was grown up and it was an eyesore, and it's really been a big improvement in our community, and we're excited to see you guys support it, and thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the application? Hearing none, seeing none, we will close that portion. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the application? Please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Julian Smith, and I've put my clock on. Farming is a great thing. I used to own the best part of a colonial-era farm for 50 years and enjoyed watching my field being hayed and so on. And I had weddings there, et cetera. But why this particular land? The application says it's 7.42 acres, but most of it, half of it, as you can see, is marsh. So how much of this land is actually useful for agriculture when you take away the access road, the house that's on the property? There's lots of good agricultural land in Glynn County. So why this particular site? I think what we have here is an example of dropping the first shoe. The real noise is going to come when the other shoe is dropped. Commissioner Williams said that he didn't want to beat a dead horse. I have some experience in beating dead horses during the Second World War. If you want to tenderize a dead horse so you can eat it, you got to beat it. There are lots of dead horses that need to be beat in this county. And one of the dead horses is something that Commissioner Brunson objects to, the forest agriculture zoning. What I'm really objecting to here, and I think others may be here to do the same thing, is changing this to FA. FA opens a huge can of worms, and it's so disgusting, I won't even describe it. Oh, there's so much to say here and so little time. I'll do my best. I believe Mr. McQuigg mentioned school tours. Well, that means school buses. Why school tours? There are farms all over Glynn County which might be better places for these tours. In your packet, I hope you have the actual application. It's not on the county calendar website. I've seen no application. I've seen no deed. I've seen no document from the actual owners of the property, whoever they may be, giving Mr. McQuigg the authority to speak on behalf of the owners. And he refers to himself as, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. But he said when he came up that he was speaking on behalf of the owners. But I know that he has a family relationship to the owners. So I'm sure he is part, in one way or another, of the ownership. But it is not spelled out in the documents that are available to the public, and I hope it's available to you. I wonder how many of these people here in the audience have stayed through all of this so they can hear what you have to say about this. And I think it would be appropriate for the chair to ask how many people here are basically in opposition to this application. And if you're not willing to do it, sir, I can do it. If you're in opposition, might you...
Mr. Smith, I've
I know.
allowed you
I'm sorry.
some leeway in the past to take this meeting over. It's not happening tonight.
Okay. So, I hope that this land continues to be used in a good way. I'm glad that the land has been improved, the view of the marsh has been opened up, the junk has been taken away. These are all positive things. But this zoning change really does open a can of worms. And one more thing, one commissioner asked what would happen if these bees get loose. Well, that's the whole point of having bees. You want them to pollinate the flowers and the vegetables and so on in your neighbor's gardens. I used to have bees, and I had to ask the county not to spray. There are worse things than mosquitoes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition to this application, please come forward and state your name, sir.
My name is Bill Harbison. I've lived on Blythe Island for a long, long time. I come here as a resident that opposes what is being requested in here. What I heard tonight is different than what's being requested in this zone change. Nothing they asked for tonight needs this zone change except for one thing. That's the stand, because that's a commercial sale. Maybe one more thing, the dining venue. It says private dining venues. If it's private, why do you need a zoning change? I heard nothing that requires zoning change. Our island is 99% or more residential. The only commercial you come across there is when you come off Turtle River Bridge is a convenience store and then the lumber yard across the road from it. The closest other thing is the motorcycle gang I've been forced to live across the street from for 25 years. Pardon me. It used to be a video store. The slippery slope has led it to be a motorcycle club for a long time. If this is passed, it opens the door to a really slippery slope. We don't need a commercial operation in the middle of Blythe Island. That's residential. The biggest step this board can take in zonings is changing from residential to commercial. Everything they proposed tonight sounds great, and I have no problem with anybody having the highest and best use of their property. But what they're doing right now and what they're proposing verbally doesn't require any change. They're good neighbors, nothing's going on there that shouldn't be. But to change it to commercial, what happens next year when the dining events require wine to be served and they come for a special permit for an alcohol license? And what happens when the next owners come in and they can operate under this with a whole broad spectrum of commercial operations that puts it right in the middle of our residential? I would ask that you deny it and that they be permitted to go on as they're doing right now, which doesn't require any change. Thank you for your time. I appreciate letting the public know.
Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Good evening, sir. Please state your name for the record.
Good evening. My name's Charles Norman. I am a partner in Blythe Island Baptist Church, and Pastor Tim Brown has asked me to come and read a letter I believe he sent to you, ma'am. And I just have a few comments after that, if you don't mind. Blythe Island Church owns the 2 adjoining lots to the proposed rezoning of this Potlicker Farm. One lot directly adjoins the right-of-way that will be used for egress to the house, and the house that we actually own is at 680 Blythe Island Drive. That used to be the parsonage, and now we use it as a parsonage for hopefully our upcoming next-gen pastor, which will be our youth and children's pastor. Reading their request brings us concerns in response to the rezoning announcement. Residential and conservation from CP to forest agricultural, conditioning limited use as a conservation product. My understanding, the applicant, and I'm not going to go over everything they've already said that they were going to do here, but also limited agritourism and private dining events, I think are definitely something we're concerned about. We're concerned about the traffic on the easement road that is there. Existing adjoining houses are now barred from using that, which borders our property as well. Hiring our next-gen pastor is going to have a lot of children around that house. That we hope that's what our next-gen pastor is going to do. If not, we'll be finding another one, because that's what his or her job is going to be. If they have private dining events there, as Mr. Strickland said, usually there's some alcohol accompanying those private dining events. If they're, and that is just a bad situation for a lot of kids to be around. And I'm one of the youth leaders at my church, and if you think you can control youth, good for you. They will get away from you, and we don't want any of them hurt, simply because that's what's going on. We're also concerned about the air quality and naturally the odor from a possible commercial chicken farming as listed in the rezoning request. The bee colonies, y'all have already discussed about the spraying. I don't need to think that. And the gentleman before me, if they're going to operate a garden, there's no rezoning needed here. I'm sorry, I'm very skeptical. I've been in law enforcement 35 years, and it sounds to me like they're minimizing what they're going to use the place for. If they want to get special use permits, also what that's going to be is, you want a garden, you want to use it for this. Okay, you want to have a 4th of July party. They're going to have to come to you to get a special use permit. Then we're going to have to come down here and oppose a special use permit. I'm thinking slippery slope is exactly what's happening here. If you approve this, There's going to be more and more business brought, not that that's not your job, but that doesn't need to be there anyway. This, also, one more thing. I don't know what this is, but my pastor sent me a text today stating that he had talked to the farm owners and that they wanted to have approximately 25 chickens. They wanted to move the bees way off from the corner part of the property, and that they wanted to be able to have their garden. If that's the case and what they said to him is true, we shouldn't even be here. We're wasting your time. There's no rezoning needed. That's our points. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Good evening, sir. Please state your name for the record.
Cliff Browning. I live in a lot directly across from the farm now. A few things I'd like to clear up, or at least answer from our part, is, you know, when I hear the staff say that this is a low-density area, a lot of those lots are old home places, and they were big pieces of property. So that's one reason it creates low density. But our point of view is that talking to all the neighbors there, and if you was to do a poll, you'd see that I believe 9 out of 10 in here are against this rezoning. We would be affected. I don't want chicken houses. I don't want this slippery slope to get started, because I feel that's what would happen. You know, I listened to the lawyer say that nobody has brought up anything, where there's a room full of people here that will disagree with the lawyer on that. So all I ask is y'all consider our property values that could be affected if you approve this rezoning, and take that in consideration, because it matters to the people who border this piece of property. And the other statement I heard, the property that's in the center right there, that property was already there and purchased by Miss Rita before Mr. Gowan purchased all that property. So that's why that house is there. So it's a beautiful house, and I look forward to seeing it every day. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Please state your name for the record.
My name is Phil Flournoy, and I live approximately 200 yards down from my property. It's about 200 yards north of the proposed zoning area. And I would like to just say that I agree with everything that's been said earlier today. I've lived there for going on 70 years. And I would like to echo the issue about the size of these lots and how these lots that are there in what's called a low-density area historically have occurred. This is the oldest residential area on Blythe Island. Back in 1873, I believe it was, there was a tremendous outbreak of yellow fever in Brunswick. So people began to flee away from the city. The yellow fever was brought in here by some sailors on a commercial vessel that had come out of Cuba. So the Army stepped in and stopped people from leaving the area, from leaving Brunswick, and corralled them up in very, very terrible conditions. A few families slipped away. One of those families was the Wiggins family, and they're represented here by dozens of people here. And to get away from the yellow fever, they crossed across Turtle River into a little creek that's not shown on that map there, and set up their homes there. As a matter of fact, in my lifetime, I saw the original house that was put there. It was actually damaged in the big hurricane of 1893. Now, these families that are living there are heirs of those original settlers who have been there, the Liptrotts, you know, the Liptrott families, the Wiggins families, Jimmy Page, some of the rest of the folks here, the Jacksons, have inherited this property. It's quiet. You go to Blythe Island, you have a community of people. This is a small community within that community. And if you step in there, the first thing you notice is the tranquility. And there's not a sound. As I said, I've lived there going on 70 years. And all my friends and neighbors have been there, most of them an equal number of years. I'd like to clear up some things too about there's been some very sort of nasty language about the mess that was hauled off. The owner of that property, who is a descendant of the original families there and inherited the property, was physically disabled. He couldn't, by the time he passed away a couple of years ago, which brought us to where we are today, he couldn't drive, he couldn't walk, he couldn't clean up, couldn't haul off trash. He's not here to testify or to speak today because he finally passed away, which was probably a blessing for him because he suffered for many years. So don't get the idea that this was just pure neglect. Don't get the idea that this was a goat farm. You heard one of my neighbors testify a few minutes ago that she loved to go down and feed the goat, pet the goats. So did we. I took my children, my grandchildren down. It's not a goat farm, and I object to that being used. If one person can come forward and tell me that that was ever a commercial farm, I'd like to hear it. It was not a commercial farm. It was more like pets. There were 4 or 5 goats out there. We'd go down, take my grandchildren, and they'd reach through and pet the goats. It was not a goat farm. Okay, it's been said that there will be no enlargement of the area that is being farmed today.
You've reached your time. I'll give you about 30 seconds to
All right,
wrap up.
well, anyway, these folks came in a year ago by their own admission, and by their own admission illegally began growing crops and selling them. Okay, so today they're coming in here saying we want to make this legal. It's sort of like to me, it sounds like the story about the young boy that killed his mother and father and then asked for mercy
all right, sir, thank you.
because he was an orphan.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak in opposition? Yes,
I'm Daniel Parsley. I live on 274 Parlin Road in Blythe Island. I'm not speaking directly in opposition. I'm just going to express my concerns. Thank you, Mr. Lee. You brought up one of my concerns. What about any future owners? What commercial rights are they going to get with this property? I'm a business owner. I go down, I get my occupational tax certificate every year. I do it out of my home. A lot of other people do on Blythe Island. We got businesses. If you're going to make it nowadays, you got to have a business, you know. I don't mind the man having a garden. I don't mind him selling his garden. I don't want to see this rezoning going through with that word commercial in there. I don't care if they rezone it, forest agriculture. I don't want it commercial forest agriculture. It's sort of understood if someone has forest agriculture land, they might have blueberries, pine trees. Yeah, they're going to do their best use of the land. They're going to sell what they grow on the property. That's sort of understood in agriculture. you have a farm, you sell it to, pay the taxes, you sell your produce or whatever you're growing to pay your taxes. We know you're going to get your taxes. We got to do something to pay your taxes. So, Ernie's place, like they've already filled you in on the situation with Ernie and how it was, and he had a few goats, and it sort of was nice for the ambience of the island. I don't think he's hurting the ambience of the island, but I do definitely have some concerns with the way this proposal's been put before you. And I hope you use your wisdom to do what's right for us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Please come forward and state your name.
James Page Jr. I live directly to the north. My property is adjacent to this property. I have, it's been pointed out that I have legal access to Pot Liquor Road. My concern would be if this is approved, would it limit the number of chickens they have? Or would they just have unlimited number that they could put over there? And my concern also would be a fruit stand or vegetable stand on Blythe Island Drive. I believe it would cause a traffic problem. The speed limit's 35 on that road, and nobody drives 35. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. You've already spoken, sir. Okay, I'll allow you for just... Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please come forward and state your name again for the record.
I'm Bill Harbison. I live on Blythe Island Highway. Been there about 25 years. I'm not a native of Glynn County. I'm a native of Atlanta, Georgia. But I've been coming down to St. Simon's Island from the time I was about 6 years old. About 30 years ago, I sold the properties I had on St. Simon's, as did all of my Atlanta buddies and everybody else, and we all left. Only one couple stayed down here. They could afford to move to Sea Island, which I couldn't. But we all left St. Simon's because of what was done through zoning. So much of our residential areas over there were encroached by commercial zoning. And now the island is exactly what we thought it would be, and I wouldn't go back there for anything. We like our little island. We like that it's rural. We like that it's not commercial. And we'd love to keep it that way. Thanks. I appreciate you letting us have our say.
Anyone else? Yes, sir. Please come forward and state your name. I got about 8 minutes.
My name's Layman Humphreys. I live in Cameron Place. I don't live right next to where this proposed rezoning is located, but I do live in a Blythe Island is traditionally a residential island, strictly residential with only one exception, and that's the little store right off of Blythe Island Bridge. In where this is proposed, that's residential, and it's moved. They're wanting to rezone this in the middle of a residential area to make it commercial. How would you feel if somebody right next to you wanted to rezone commercially right next to you? You wouldn't like it, and neither does the residents of Blythe Island. They don't like it either. And just one other comment, and I'll be through, because we heard that they are already selling produce at their restaurant. I think Mr. Williams brought this up, that what's the difference? That's commercial sale. If I sell you a tomato off of that farm, that's a commercial sale. If I slice it up in a restaurant, that's not a commercial sale? Yes, it is. It's still a commercial sale, any way you slice it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, we're down to about 5 minutes, so if anyone else wants to speak in opposition, yes, sir, please come forward and state your name.
Michael Connor, I live on Bluff Island next door to Bill here. I just want to hit that one point Bill did. When that motorcycle club that we have to hear every day firing up their bikes loud as can be, this can happen over there. You get commercial, they sell it to someone else 5 years down the road, you got a biker club there and you got to hear them rev up their motors. It can happen. I'm just saying, we have to deal with it. I hope you guys don't have to deal with it on the other side. So we just need to squash this, sorry.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay, hearing none, seeing none, we will close the public hearing portion. A couple things that I took note of while everyone was talking, and I'm sure that as we're going to give the applicant a chance to rebut, I'm sure that this will be brought up. Nowhere in this application is the word commercial used. This is a request to rezone to forest agricultural. So commercial is not in the zoning. In addition, we are not here to interpret what is the law, whether it's legal or illegal to grow a vegetable in your backyard and sell it in your restaurant. We are here to determine a zoning issue, and that's all. So please understand that. Mr. McQuigg, would you and Mr. Sam like to come up and rebut anything? Yes, but that's the official zoning. Forest agriculture and conservation preservation. They're going to operate a commercial farm, but that's not the zoning. Commercial's not the zoning. Yes, sir.
I heard repetitively, we don't have a problem with what they're doing now. We don't have a problem with them selling their vegetables to other restaurants. Allow them to continue doing that. Don't give this zoning approval, but allow that. That's why we're here. We can't do that legally. We've talked to staff for the past year and a half about being able to give this produce to somebody besides us. Their interpretation of the zoning codes is it can be used for the owner's use. That's the only use we put it to. We'd like to expand that use. These nice folks have their opinions, and I applaud them for it. I encourage them to get the county to change the zoning code to do what they want to have happen. But right now, you can't do what they say is okay to do. I've heard it several times. Let them keep selling this to the restaurant. Let them use it like this, but don't approve this commercial use. We're not asking you to approve a commercial use here. If there's any commercial use, like Mr. Lee asked earlier, it's got to come back before you with a public hearing, and I would expect, based on what you've heard today, you deny it. We're not asking for that today. We're asking for forest agriculture with significant prohibitions for the rezoning.
Can I say one thing? I haven't made any money at the farm yet. Everything I do is a gift. So, until we get rezoned.
There was a question about limitation of number of chickens. Mr. Sam said 10 to 15, no more than 30. If we want to write that into the code, into the zoning, that's perfectly fine. We have no opposition to us having a limitation of the number of chickens. And if we want to limit it to no more than 30, great. No more than 25, wonderful. We would offer that up. That's not an issue. And with regard to a fruit stand actually sitting on Blythe Island Drive, I don't know that that's ever been contemplated. The contemplation is if there would be a fruit stand, it would be actually on the property. And on the site plan, there was a location for that, not to impede any flow of traffic on Blythe Island. They have to turn down Potlicker Road to come in and park on the property, get out and examine what they wanted to get, and then they could go. That's all I have to tell you. Yes, sir.
Mr. Sam,
Yes, sir.
how long have you been out there thus far?
Just a little over a year.
Has there been any complaints that you're aware of
from any of the surrounding neighbors or anything as far as what's been done with the property or what's going on with the property or anything like that?
The only thing I ever saw was online, and like I said, I tried to address all those complaints. I mean, I spoke with the pastor of Blythe Island over the phone, but I don't know who he is.
Well, I put a lot of faith in Facebook, so, you know.
Yeah, I didn't even know the neighborhood group existed until somebody started talking bad about us, and I was like, oh, man, I guess.
But I'm very much against putting something commercial in a residential area. But having said that, I don't understand, for the most part, what you're asking to do now that you haven't been doing all along, except for the selling to other people.
Get a farm ID number, make money, pay taxes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Commissioners, any other questions for the applicant?
Not for them, but can the county come back up? It seems to me that the larger issue is what 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, what does that look like? What are the possibilities that these neighbors are going to be faced with? Can someone realistically do something that will just destroy their property values and make it something that they didn't intend it to be? What is there a median there? Is there a place where we can, everybody in the room can settle, if you will?
Sure. Yeah, I think really the strongest answer to that is these restrictions that they've proposed that are part of your packet. I mean, this is what would not be allowed, and then what still would be allowed what's listed in the FA zoning district, with the exception of all of these things. So I think comments are mentioned before about the size of the property, and I think that's really the limiting factor here when you're talking about agriculture. I mean, it's with really, I'm not exactly sure for upland, but I'd say it's probably maybe around 4 acres of upland. And I'm probably a little bit off on that, but about half the 7-acre property is marsh. So, on 3 to 4 acres of upland, I mean, you're pretty limited in what you can really do with agriculture. So, I think some of the concerns about large chicken houses. I mean, I'm not sure how many chickens you could accommodate on 3 or 4 acres if you were to do a, large poultry operation. But that could be where, if you wanted to limit the number, as they mentioned, whether it's 25 or 30 or whatever, the county might be comfortable with. I'm not sure offhand the zoning of the motorcycle club, but I think the bigger concern would be, if this was going to be rezoned to general commercial or highway commercial, then there is a whole range of commercial uses that could be allowed there. That absolutely, if the current applicant went away, yeah, someone could come in and do a host of uses. So, I mean, whoever comes in here is going to be, limited to what you all approve with those uses.
Thank you.
Question, I guess, also, the whole FA and what people are talking about, the commercial use of the property, though. So, but I guess growing crops on it, if you sell them commercially, it would be a commercial use for it. Although I don't consider this, I guess, commercial in the strictest sense of, like we're, I won't say an auto parts store, a grocery store, that sort of thing. And we could limit it to actually to no actual sales on site, that sort of thing, if need be. And to me, it's a real green use. I like that, but I also understand we got neighbors too that got to live in this area.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think, as you mentioned, and then Chairman Edgy mentioned as well, was the word commercial. And really, the only reason that word commercial is really even being thrown out there is because the current zoning specifically says non-commercial. So that's really what restricts them now. They can grow whatever they want to on the property, but it has to be non-commercial. And so that's really why, under FA, we don't use the word commercial in terms of agriculture. We say growing and establishment, And so, that's really kind of where that goes in, or comes into play. And I will mention, some folks were mentioning, what do they really need this rezoning for? I mean, the other reason is poultry is not allowed in R20. So you can have horses on your property in R20, but you cannot have any other livestock or poultry. So the fact they want chickens, they would have to be rezoning something else to have the chickens. And then, commercial growing of crops are really the two primary things.
And no goats in R20?
No goats are allowed in R20, no. And they would be allowed in FA, but that is one of the limitations they've put in here is,
But it's my understanding they already have chickens in the neighborhood anyway.
There are, right, and those are currently not allowed under R20. So to have the chickens, they would need to be rezoning for that.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
So anybody on Blythe Island that has chickens, they're in violation of the zoning?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And we just kind of ignore it.
Yeah, we just get rid of all the chickens.
We are complaint-based and complaint-driven. So
Okay.
unless we receive
All
a
right.
complaint, we will investigate it. But if there's
All
no
right.
complaints, that's our stance. We are complaint-driven when it comes to that.
And so this young man is trying to do it the right way.
Correct.
And okay.
Right.
So the bottom line to this is that the only thing that they would be doing different tomorrow than they're doing today is they would be allowed to sell the produce and possibly the eggs and the honey.
Right.
That's the only difference.
Yes, I'm sorry, the bees are the other,
Right.
bees are not specifically allowed in R20 either.
That I contend they're already selling. I'm just saying, that's kind of what it looks like to me, So they're not doing anything different in my mind, because they're already doing it.
And nobody's complained.
And nobody's complaining.
Yeah, and just, something else I'll add, sometimes these types of things that, they're asking for or any property may be looking for, sometimes that can be, accommodated by doing amendments to the zoning code. And, as you all know, we're rewriting our zoning code right now. And so, you could see some different changes. However, my understanding is I think a few years ago, chicken ordinances were came in front of the county and those were, not adopted throughout different zoning districts. But yeah, aside from the commercial aspect, like we said, there's folks out there having have chickens on residential properties. And, there are ways to maybe accommodate that by restricting number of chickens in different zoning districts, but that's not currently something that the county's adopted. So really, this is their only way to try to achieve what they want to achieve is by rezoning it.
Well, I can say the whole time earlier in my life when I was younger that I lived in Highland Park, I had chickens,
Right.
Stephanie, in the hierarchy of zoning, this would be considered a down zoning, is that correct?
Technically, yes, it is a down zone, yes.
And Stephanie, I know the answer to this question, but just for everyone in the group, to Commissioner Williams' point, 20 years from now, if this applicant sells this property, the new owners cannot put up a gas station.
Correct.
They would have to come before this board and then request a rezoning to a commercial zoning.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
But they could still, there are several lots of record apparently on this right now.
Right.
But they could still build a residential home on those lots.
Right, that is correct. There was a subdivision, I want to say maybe 20 plus years or 30 years ago. But yeah, there are a number of lots of records.
Right.
So they could build single family homes and that's still, allowed in the FA zoning.
They could also do anything that's allowed in forest agriculture that's not prohibited.
Correct. Correct. Any further questions, commissioners? I'm sorry, the public comment period or public hearing period is over. I'm sorry, ma'am. It's against our rules and we have to have rules. I apologize. Okay, commissioners, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I would ask you, Mr. Chairman, to explain to these people, you're not approving anything tonight. You're only making a recommendation. And that these
Mr.
people who oppose this
Mr. Smith.
need to come to the county commission meeting.
All right, Mr. Smith.
The county commission is going to make the decision.
All right, thank you. Mr. Smith, thank you. This board is tasked with a task to recommend to the Glynn County Board of Commissioners approval or disapproval of this application. That is what we do, okay? You still have another opportunity to present your case to the Board of Commissioners, okay? So, are you satisfied, sir?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Now, Commissioners, again, I'll call for the question or call for a motion. No, sir. No, sir.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I make a recommendation to approve ZM 4224 Pot Liquor Farm rezoning with the stipulations that have been made earlier about there can be no dining or events on the property, and we limit the number of chickens to no more than 25.
I second the motion.
We have a motion on the floor and a second to approve with the conditions. Any discussion?
Is it possible to add on there to not being able to sell on that particular property? Is that something that needs to be added?
Well, I think maybe that's a question for the applicant to determine if that is an acceptable, is that?
Would you like the applicant to come forward?
Well, I mean, that's under a special use permit to be able to sell on property.
Okay, so that'd be no. They can't.
Gotcha.
Mr. Chairman, I would be more inclined to agree with this if this area were not encapsulated by residential homeowners, the church property, neighbors directly in front of the property that's encapsulated on three sides by it, and other neighbors in the area. I just don't see any reason to approve a rezoning for an area that's already allowing them to do pretty much what they want to do already. And I still have concerns about future use of the property under the forest agricultural rezoning.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by raising your right hand. 5. All those opposed? 1. Motion carries. Thank you. Ms. Leaf, are there any Planning Commission announcements?
No, sir, we do not have any.
Did you want to ask about the?
When will this particular item go to the county commission? Do you know?
So, yeah, it has not yet been noticed. We were going to wait for this action. So at this point, it'd be for the first meeting in March. So it'd be the first Thursday in March.
Steffi, question. February was kind of a date when we were going to be doing something with Envision Glynn, and is that still on target, on schedule, et cetera?
That's a good question. We actually had a conference call with the consultants today. We are looking at a date a little bit further into the spring. So there's about a couple months delay on some of the plans we had talked about. So you are correct. We had talked about doing something in February, but we're now looking probably in another couple months. So hopefully we'll have an update for you here real soon on that timeline.
This is a. Please exit quietly. We're still conducting business. So that is a work session that you're talking about?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, it'd be another joint work session.
Okay. Any other questions for staff before we adjourn? Nope. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.